never give up. I never give up. I never give up. Turn around.
Hi, guys. Welcome back to My Steps to Sobriety, my show on YouTube and as a podcast with me, your host, Stefan Neff. Another fantastic day today because I'm actually honored to have John Davis on my show. John is a man who, for 10 years, defined himself in a very specific way, as a strong man, as a military man. And with all the things that come with that, you need to be a certain personality within the military. But then what happens when you get out of that military? So one day there is day of discharge. And now what? Now a different life starts. How do you adapt? And how do you adapt to such a dramatic change when you then throw in a bit of trauma, the odd explosion, the odd IED, the odd being shot at. And that somehow doesn't really wash so well with our survival instincts that we have got in there. And sometimes they get revved up a little bit. Yeah. Been there, done that, got the anxiety attacks for it. And therefore, I want to know how my guest today changed his life around in such a way that he is now going out there and teaching others about transformation, about being a role model after having, like me, looked at far too many bottles and has done some other really good coping mechanisms so that we were going to go into depth here. Yeah, right. Cool. So, John, welcome to my show.
Thanks for having me on, Stefan. I'm really looking forward to it.
Oh, no, it's cool, man. When did you go into the military? Was that always a dream of yours, or was that something that just sort of happened?
Well, when you get out of high school, you kind of have three traditional options. You're thinking school, workforce, or military. Mm. And at the time I went to college because that was what you're supposed to do. It wasn't necessarily because I felt any great drive to get an education or learn anything. It was just kind of the next reasonable life step. And when I got there, I was far too immature to make anything of it. I liked girls and drinking at 18 and 19 a lot more than I liked going to class. And that reflected in my coursework. So I ended up dropping out of college and heading straight for the military recruiting offices because I figured this might be, my grandfather was in the military and he said that it might straighten me out a little bit at the time was his words. So now 10 years later, the military straightened me out a little bit, but it took a while.
No shit, Sherlock. Well, 10 years in the military would probably do it for most people to get you at least a bit straight. Was it difficult for you to go into such a hierarchical system? Because when you loved the girls, when you loved the booze, you were probably not so well disciplined at that time. Was that a shell shock for you to go for boot camp?
I think it's such a dramatic life adjustment that I think the transition presents problems for everyone. It's an entirely different way of life. I was used to a far more individualist way of living, and the military is very communal. You're on a team, you're working together for a common purpose. And then they kind of depersonalize you a little bit. It's not really a malicious thing. It's just kind of the nature of the beast, to where I wasn't called my first name. I wasn't called John. I was called Private Davis and then Sergeant Davis. And then for me, my struggles never really came in the military. They came when I got out and I had to figure out who to be again.
Interesting. What was your military specialty?
Infantry.
Nice. So you stuck with that?
Yeah, in Afghanistan, kicking indoors, doing things like that, which interestingly enough, my combat experiences didn't bother me as much as trying to figure out who I was again after the military. A lot of people, I think, kind of think combat is the thing that causes veterans problems when they get out. But non-combat veterans in the United States actually kill themselves more than combat veterans.
Interesting. And you can imagine that, because you have got such a structured life, where more or less everything is clearly prescribed. There are certain rules for absolutely everything. You've got standard operating procedures for, a lot of things. And the more specialized you become, the more these things apply. In the special forces, you go for every single bloody scenario and create an SOP for it. So, which is actually really, really cool. No one does that in real life. And then suddenly I can see that when you come from such a structured world into a world where you actually have not been thinking in a certain way for 10 years, you are lost. And I think that is the common thing that you find in many type A personalities, but also in many people who have really thrown themselves into their job, maybe to escape their childhood, maybe to escape their other traumas. Workaholics are just as bad as alcoholics. Hey, I'm the man. Okay, I think I was a workaholic long before I was an alcoholic, because I was just 110% in there, and I guess you were doing the same thing within your specialty, within your job, so to speak. It's intriguing. So was there? It's interesting what you say, that for 10 years you were in there. Was there actually a planned transition where actually by the time you had your day of discharge, were there actually some support systems in place from the military to assist you?
The military is more concerned about you while you're serving. They put all this time and energy and money into training you and making you the best soldier you can.
Yeah.
But then once you're out, I mean, you're on your own. There's more so than people think. That's just kind of how it goes. And like you mentioned, there's not really a blueprint for civilian life. I mean, there's not a blueprint for life at all, but especially jumping from the highly structured nature of the military into civilian life was a struggle. I got lucky because I started off at college, which is why I wrote my book and why I want to help veterans, because you have to meet people where they're at. Yeah. And the first stop for veterans when you got in the military is traditionally college.
Unless, of course, you have got rip-roaring tinnitus and other problems. And I read your book. You were describing sort of being there in that new world, and you couldn't hear shit from the instructor, from the professor in the front. You gave him, hey man. I could just see that happening. It made me cringe when I read that. My, oh my. I mean, it is... how did you go about that? I mean, you must have felt like a dick, and that on top of you trying to adjust, man.
You feel so out of place. It's hard figuring yourself out when you're in there. You're at least 10 years older than everyone. You're a non-traditional student. I had some service-connected disabilities that provided, problems beyond just the learning. And student veterans tend to be older. They tend to have more responsibilities, tend to have families, tend to need to work. And as you know, your economic health obviously plays a lot into your mental health. And I got lucky because I got a job helping other student veterans at my school, working part-time. So that kind of led into me making this checklist of here, when I give to new veterans that come in school, I made this checklist for them. Hey, John's Success College Tips. They're kind of like, here's a map of the school. Here's how you be successful here based on my experiences. And then that morphed into the book that I wrote.
That's brilliant. But let's go back to your military specialty. You were infantry, and you made it to sergeant. So you got promoted on your various tour of duties. You were basically already in a leadership role as being a sergeant there. Did those leadership qualities, were you able to transfer them over? Or is that initially actually such a breakup in the world that was not able, that you were not able to use that?
As you know, it's easier to lead others than to lead yourself. And
nicely said.
I mean, I kind of threw myself into help, looking to help others. And self-leadership is a little bit more complicated. You can always tell people what to do. You can say, hey, do this, but then doing it yourself is an entirely different ball game. So for me, what really helped me the most is just helping other people, which sounds, because I wanted to be someone that they could come to with their problems. You're not going to come to someone with your problems if they got more than you.
Very cool. At the same token, it is if you see someone who is probably not so versed in life and he wants to give you advice, you think, you're right. You've barely just stopped breastfeeding and now you want to give me a tip. Yeah, fuck you.
Yeah, it's always the guys who are out of shape at the gym that are giving all the fitness advice.
Exactly. You say it.
The guy with no money giving you
exactly.
advice about economics.
Exactly right. So therefore, I think it's good if you have been in the shit yourself and you know what you're talking about. That makes you so much more a authentic specimen. So that's actually cool. How many veterans are actually out there? I mean, for crying out loud, what are the figures in the United States? How many % of the population actually go to the military? Are there figures out there?
So the military now is more disconnected from society than ever before. Only less than 1% of people serve in the military in the United States. And the issue from that 1% is that they all come from military families. So 80% of people serving report having a close family member, like a parent that served. Right. So you have this kind of small segment of the population that's kind of shouldering the burden of protecting the nation.
True. But having said that, the way I understand the societal structures in the United States is that for many young men, the military is a way out of their maybe not so ideal lifestyle, their rough times. So therefore, you would expect that these particular people who are finding themselves in deep trouble and needed to be straightened out, like you just said, that there is no strong military history in their families. So is that what I described to you? Is that a prejudice or is that a wrong perception?
I think that the Vietnam mentality of go to the military or go to war, go to jail kind of stuck a little bit. Yeah. And people have an idea of the military, that it's kind of an option of last resort for people, right. Which it sort of was for me, to where it's like, okay, well, I'm 19 years old. I can't really get a job that I like other than, and I failing out of college. Yeah. So it seemed like a good option.
Fair call. I know from your book that you certainly tried to deal with the pressures of life at various stages in your career and after your career in interesting ways. I mean, you went to college, you then went on to go to Harvard to actually, and I give it away, this is the most tattooed graduate from Harvard, okay, that is out there, and I'm still trying to convince him to actually take his shirt off, guys. So, so he's not yet biting, but I'm getting there. So. Where does all that come in? I mean, so far what you've been explaining to me, yes, I was in the military, structured, and now I'm helping students. Boom. There's a little bit something missing in the middle there.
Well, when I first got out of the military, I was used to someone telling me what to do for so long. And then when nobody appeared to tell me what to do, I went down a rabbit hole of PTSD and pills and alcohol. And I think a lot of my problems started because I was over medicated by the VA, to where I went in there saying, hey, I have these issues with anxiety. I have these flashbacks from my combat experiences. I'm trying to figure out who I am. I don't know what to do with myself. And then they kind of threw an entire pharmacy at me. And that really, then I started self-medicating, overusing the pills, combining them with alcohol, and really went to a dark place. It was kind of a roller coaster initially, and I'm happy that I landed in college And that provided a little bit of structure for me that I really needed.
What was the time frame where you sort of explored other avenues?
Probably about 6 months before I ended up, kind of probably when I was running out of money, then I got to figure out something to do. But when I was in, I thought that when I was in Afghanistan, the thing that had really, I would say, shaken me the most and impacted me the most was seeing education for young girls there, to where young girls were not, more than actively discouraged to not learn how to read. I was in an area where we were trying to open up schools for girls, and that was obviously kind of a no-go. And people would come, shoot at the schools, try and blow the schools up, and seeing that kind of response, to me as an American was a little shocking. So I thought that getting the education would be a good start. And initially I wanted to do like work in refugee camps because I thought that would be a good landing place for my combat experiences. So I went to Harvard for international education.
When were you in Afghanistan? Which deployment?
2010 and 2012.
Okay, cool.
A little over 2 years.
And that, and everyone who knows a little bit about the conflict there knows about the struggles and the ups and downs and the attempts to change a society, because it's not just Taliban. It's not just this kind of black and white kind of picture of baddies and goodies. It's far more complex with tribal problems and just a way of life that is so different to the United States. So I think that's fair to say, isn't it? Okay.
Yeah. When you're over there, I really developed kind of a love for the people, because all they had known is hardship. And then you get back to America, Western culture, and people are complaining about not enough whipped cream in their coffee or something like that. When after seeing extreme poverty, you're like, these people have never had electricity and never taken a hot shower in their lives. Seeing things like that really made me eventually appreciative.
And gratitude is such an empowering thing once you actually accept it as part of your life, and you did. But then again, there was this kind of getting confused and trying to figure out who you really are. You were saying you basically went after the girls, you went after the booze, you went after the drugs. You basically tried to what did the drugs do to you? What did you get out of it? Was it escaping the reality? Was it an escape from the nightmares and from maybe the hypervigilance, the anxiety? Did that work?
No, it didn't work. In fact, I think it made things a lot worse because I was, I think the more pills I took, even the prescribed ones, the worse off I got, to where I felt eventually like I was just sleepwalking through my life. I was either, sleeping too much or not sleeping at all. And then just the pills deadened kind of my life experiences. I felt like I was,
So there was the pharmacological treatment after PTSD, and fair call. That is certainly has a role to play. What about acceptance therapy? What about other cognitive behavioral therapies? What about other approaches towards the PTSD? Did you get support there?
So yeah, I did all that. I did the group therapy, the individual therapy. Eventually, I kind of became fed up with the therapy system and started pursuing my own. And I think that's kind of where I had, a measure of success, at least in finding myself again, was pursuing my own versions of therapy and not ones necessarily prescribed to me.
Was the tattooing the therapy?
That was part of it. I wrote an article about tattoo therapy because you transform yourself when you get a tattoo, and tattoos in military culture have kind of long and been intertwined with each other. The first military tattoos were Japanese samurai who would tattoo their village on their body, so they knew where to take the dead body back if they died.
I didn't know that. Shit. Okay. Well, we have evolved a little bit with the tattoos nowadays.
Yeah. And now what I found is, for me, nature has been very healing. So I live in the Dominican Republic where I'm able to, swim in the ocean, walk in the jungle, and really connect with nature. And that's been a very healing experience. A lot more than any of the medication I was given. It's enabled me to find mindfulness, some more gratitude, and just an appreciation for being alive when a lot of my friends, unfortunately, are not.
With that, are you referring to those victims or those soldiers that never came home from their deployment? Or are you referring to others that came home with you and now are no longer there?
Well, as of, I think a few years ago, now I've lost more friends, to suicide than the battlefield. And the battles you fight in your head are always the hardest. And so many veterans, when they get out, struggle finding themselves again. And I almost became, a part of that suicide number as well. There was definitely dark times in my life where it crossed my mind. And it's a little difficult to talk about now, but looking back at myself then, I'm very happy to have the opportunity to help other veterans. That's what I was so excited to come on here and talk to you. And now that my book is gaining traction and helping student veterans at a pivotal part in their lives, it's really been extremely rewarding. So it's kind of like the momentum that I have now in life is what's keeping me going.
But of course, you need to get there first to that point, and that is where we all are. Once you actually come to a point where you make peace with yourself, and maybe even start accepting yourself as you are, and maybe even loving yourself, warts and all, scars on the outside and on the inside. That's the hardest thing. But once you achieve that, and once you start giving back, either in the form of writing a book or talking with others on a one-on-one or a group, etc., or going out on speaking tours, that suddenly makes you explode, or it makes you feel the power of healing. That giving others and helping others can be such a meaningful thing. And I think I got that sense from you that was really what is defining you and what was maybe helping you. Mm-hmm. You were lost when you started it at college. And by you just putting together a few tips, you wanted to prevent that happening again to others. And that's a very noble and beautiful thing, isn't it?
Yeah. And PTSD, it just doesn't have to be a forever diagnosis. I think we look at it like once you're diagnosed with PTSD, or even like, really anything, it doesn't have to be forever. There are things that you can do. You always have that with you, but there are things that you can do to, experience growth from the bad things that you went through.
Well, that's true.
And not only focus on the negative. So that's why college was a good point, a good starting point for me. But also when you learn things like, which, probably seems obvious, but people with college degrees kill themselves less. So you get more veterans, more college degrees, you have a shot at reducing the suicide numbers, because once you have the degree, it's not only about getting a diploma, it's about kind of who you become along the way. There's a journey of self-growth that you can take at college if you're so inclined, but you don't always have to, obviously. My first go around at college, there wasn't a lot of self-growth happening.
Okay. But I guess I take your point there, because college is still incredibly full of freedom compared with the working world, where you are 40 hours, 50 hours, just in there, where not necessarily growth is part of your daily life, but it's more a grind, just more grind. So I mean, and to a certain degree, that's actually quite good in the United States because as a veteran, you get very easy access to colleges, isn't it?
Yeah, and that's the biggest benefit of serving is you get to go to college. I did my entire undergrad and my master's entirely, for free, which people plunge themselves obviously deep into debt in pursuit of a college degree. And a lot of veterans that can go for free choose not to. So I wanted to give people the confidence to be able to walk in the classrooms and feel like you can do well if you utilize the skills you learned in the military.
Interesting that you say that. And ultimately, I mean, it's interesting. So if you say the skills that you learn in military are helping or can help you tremendously, why then do we see people struggling coming out of the military?
It's easy to focus on the negative, and I know you don't like being called a doctor, but as a doctor, whatever you focus on is going to grow. So when you focus on PTSD, when you focus on your problems, it's going to grow. So it's so easy to just, kind of zero in on that and forget about the good things the military taught you. So like for me, when I started off in college, I've never been late for anything since the day I joined the military. I think I was late one day and I had to do push-ups for every minute I was late and while getting yelled at. So,
exactly.
I've never late for anything. And that's what college is sometimes. And that's what life is. It's just showing up. If you show up in the right place at the right time and in the right clothes, you're going to be okay.
Not just okay. 80% of success is showing up. And that is so nice. It is so many times when some very interesting things happened in my life at moments when I so did not want to be there. But I made a point of showing up, and suddenly I thought, what the fuck? How did that now happen? And opportunities come along that you otherwise would have never grasped.
It just takes putting yourself in a position to get the opportunities. And that's why in college, there's so many opportunities around you all the time to network. There's guest speakers, there's clubs, there's groups. It's one of those places where you can really meet a broad, diverse group of people who are all kind of on the same self-betterment route. And there's also great role models there. I mean, one thing that I encourage people to do is when you're in college, you need some type of mentor. So one of the chapters in my book is called Reach Up and Reach Down. And it's all about you should have a mentor, but you should also be a mentor because both of those things really give you a lot. So when I was in grad school, I had the opportunity to go speak to Congress, and I wanted to create a program, kind of a mentorship role for student veterans in the United States, to where a successful student veteran will get paid to mentor and coach other junior veterans while going to school.
Nice.
So I went and got the opportunity to do the pitch to Congress. They didn't care very much and nothing got done, but it was a tremendous learning experience. And then that's what kind of made me think, okay, maybe my route of helping isn't through legislative actions or anything like that. It's more the, one-on-one help. And that's what led me to writing, to try and reach a greater number of people.
Beautiful. And I think that the key thing there to say is that again, you're taking action. And you are not, you have refused to be a victim. You refuse to be even a survivor. You have become a thriver. You have transformed yourself more and more by taking action. And I think that is the key to any kind of improvement. Did the writing process help you? When you started? Was that something that actually helped you heal, or was it more to give you a sense of purpose?
When I think it's for both, but when you're writing, you're automatically more reflective. You have to think about things, and then you have to rewrite them and edit it. So it really let me analyze my own life, and then helping other, problems are always kind of easier to spot in other people than in yourself. So when I was doing, coaching student veterans at school, I'm like, well, here's your problem. You're not going to class. So that's pretty easy to figure out. And a lot of the problems we have the solutions are simple. I like to say that problems are really complicated. Solutions are easy. So your problem is you're an alcoholic. Your solution, which is a complicated problem, but your solution is stop drinking, which, it's 2 words, stop drinking. It's harder said than done, but it's easier to spot the problems in other people. So when I was helping people out, it really opened my eyes to the mistakes I was making.
Interesting. I could smell a PTSD or a depression or an alcoholic a mile away. I was very good in diagnosing it in my patients. Boy, did I struggle to accept that exactly those things were also applicable to me. And that was interesting. I had far more denial there than maybe you did there. I think I put far more hurdles up there. I mean,
did you have a one wake up call moment?
One? Many. But God, I was not ready to hear them. Okay, the universe is throwing you signs up. And in my case, the universe was probably standing there with a 2x4 brick trying to beat me over the head. And I said, no, just give me a sign. No, give me a sign. It was that. So I just didn't want to know. Okay, I was in denial for such a long time. And I think that is the key thing there. I didn't have mentors. I didn't choose to look out for a different life. I was quite happy to be the victim. I was quite happy to drown my sorrows in vodka per the gallon. It was so bizarre. And it was only when I came into rehab that essentially I spoke those words. I am an alcoholic. And bloody hell. I mean, I had hidden that fact for so long. I was quiet for so long when it came to that. Thereafter, for a week, you couldn't shut me up. I was singing it from the rooftops. I'm an alcoholic. And it was so beautiful to actually admit that you have got a problem. God, did you have the insight? I mean, the PTSD, first of all, was it clear to you that you had it? Or did you actually deny it? Was there a kind of no, I'm strong. I get over that.
I think for me, I think I kind of was misdiagnosing a lot of my problems and attributing things to PTSD. There were actually more transition stress, just to where I never really fully felt like I transitioned out of the military when I first got out. I felt like I was kind of had one foot in the military, one foot in the civilian world. Yeah. And when you're like that, you feel like you don't belong anywhere. And when veterans feel like you don't belong, that I'll tell you, it's very sad because like when I got out of the military, I went back to my small hometown in Iowa, and I just felt like a stranger there. I felt like I didn't belong because I had changed so much. The world had changed, over the course of my military career. And you get back and you feel like a stranger in your own community. And isolation is, the real danger for veterans. And that's why community is so important. And in the military, you live this communal life, and civilian life has gotten more and more individualized, especially with the rise of social media and things like that.
So true. So true. And again, that is where you're saying is find your tribe, find the people who maybe live the life that you actually would like to live. Mm-hmm. So seek out role models and try to hang around with them, so to speak.
Your environment matters so much, who you surround yourself with. There's kind of a famous military story. So heroin use in Vietnam, about 20% of U.S. soldiers were just addicted to heroin while they were there. And because the war was so brutal, it was so difficult. There was such, you're thousands of miles from home in a country that you probably had no desire to ever be in. And then when all of these soldiers got back to America, 90% of them stopped using heroin overnight. which is an off the chart success rate with heroin addicts. As you know, because your environment where you're in is so impactful to your overall well-being, and that environment was just hell.
Interesting. I didn't know that statistic, but it makes a hell of a lot of sense. And it's the willingness, though, to show up and therefore to actually take action. Because if you remain in the victim role, you don't take action. You're passive. You're often so absorbed in your pity party that you don't take action. You don't show up when maybe there is an opportunity for you to do something different.
And it's so easy for veterans to be victims. I feel like it's because the military is a convenient scapegoat. So you can always be like, oh, it's because of the war, it's because of the military, it's because of this, that. Yeah. But the victim outlook is never going to get you anywhere worth going. Feeling sorry for yourself is never going to lead you anywhere you want to go.
And whilst the picture is so clear with veterans, if you look at other people who end up in similar scenarios, which has nothing to do with the military, you can actually draw so many parallels. So if you're an economic refugee because your country is just going tits up and you're trying to find yourself somewhere in a new place, you're at the same isolation, the same, you're a foreigner in a place, all those kind of things. So the people who are moving to a different country are often isolated, and there are many other comparisons you can draw. So the ultimate principles, though, or the problems that arise from that are remaining the same. So therefore, also the solutions are essentially actually relatively straightforward. Yet, why are so few of us actually actively looking out for it? What makes you change? What made you change? You were saying, I ran out of money and probably out of places where you can put tattoos. Again, I give you that, but no, there's more. There's more. What actually made you switch? And what made you switch then in college again? Because initially you were pissed off. What?
I remember this kind of moment where I had with a military friend of mine, and I was always kind of complaining and playing the victim. I complained, oh, my therapy is not helping me. The medication is not helping me. The doctor's not helping me. The government's not helping me. My mother's not helping me, just kind of blaming whoever I could find. And finally, he just snapped at me. He said, what are you doing to help yourself? And I didn't have an answer. And that's what kind of led me into, okay, maybe I'm my responsibility, because the person in the mirror is going to be the only person that can fix you. And I think I leaned on thinking, okay, the government messed me up, so they have to fix me. But if they're the ones that messed you up, they're probably not going to be able to fix you. So kind of when I started taking that personal responsibility, that's when I really started getting some growth.
Indeed. And I think that is such a beautiful concept. Jocko Willink, a Navy SEAL, he wrote Extreme Ownership. And in this book, he explains that the principle that everyone is responsible for the things that happen. And you could say, oh, no, how can I be responsible? Well, he sort of says, well, if you are in charge of a man and he fucks up, then you either have not explained the mission right to him, you haven't given him the right equipment, you have not trained him properly. So, okay, fair call. If someone above you fucks up, then did you give that person the right information to make the right call, etc.? So there's always, you are actually involved. You're not passive, sitting back, it's all their fault, or it's all his fault. No, it is actually you take part of it. I like that principle a lot. And that is when you recover from an addiction and you look at the 12-step program, that's exactly step 4, that you do a brutal inventory of what really is going on. And we do these kind of beautiful lists. They kind of, the resentment and anger list is cool. You're going to write, 1 Jim, he did that, and that's how it made me feel. Oh, I was so angry. And that's sort of, you keep going, boom, 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 one line after the other. And then after a few days or weeks, depending on your progress, your mentor or whoever helps you will come back to that list and will actually say, cool, now 3 columns. Now let's add a 4th column. Where were you there? And did you play a role in that? Maybe how was your contribution to the whole scenario? And the moment that actually happens, oh boy, suddenly the whole thing changes. And I think that was one of the hardest things for me, to take responsibility for my own fuck ups. It was so much easier to actually blame other people and the world and the universe and I don't know, full moon, rather than actually understanding that maybe my own core values were fucked up and the way that I was behaving in response to my environment, but also in response to my own emotions. Oh boy, maybe not so pretty.
Well, that's what I think is so great about that I learned from Alcoholics Anonymous is the concept of just the sponsor, because everybody has a sponsor and everyone is a sponsor. And that's something that, I learned from my grandfather, who's really big in Alcoholics Anonymous. He's been sober like 60 years now, which is, it's always funny. And he's like, he's 94. And I was, he still says it's a struggle, which is, to me, it's
how cool is that?
It's scary and beautiful when he says that,
Oh, how beautiful is that? John, I need to meet this man. You need to introduce me to your grandfather. That is a guest on my show, because ultimately shit will not go away. On the contrary, trauma will not go away. You sort of put some trauma to bed. Other trauma helps you to grow. That's what you were referring to, this post-traumatic growth as an alternative to post-traumatic stress disorder. So that's all good. But guess what? New trauma will come. Yay!
Yeah. And that's what's so easy because everybody has a sad story. Everybody has a victim story. Everyone has things that happen to them. And even if it's their own doing, it still happened. So how you come back from that is kind of what I'm most interested in. And for me, especially with veterans, I think it's finding your new identity, finding a new challenge, and finding a new life mission. Because the military is a very challenging environment, and you get out and you don't pursue challenges in the same way. So what I want veterans to do is to move towards things that scare you a little bit, that are hard in life, because it's so easy to take your foot off the gas pedal and kind of kick your feet up, and you say, okay, well, I, kind of rest on your laurels. Like, I did this. Yeah. I went to war. I, blah, blah, blah. So now I'm just going to relax. But the type of people that join the military aren't the type of people that should be bystanders.
Nice one. And indeed, one of my earliest guests really on my show was a soldier who was the tip of the spear, the kind of infantry. I identify myself as a ass kicker. And then, unfortunately, a machine gun was a bit stronger than him, and he had his ass-kicking days cut short. And he was lost for a long time. And then finally, he allowed himself to listen to other vets who came along to actually say, hey, look, today we're going to learn how to golf. Come along. And he finally said, okay, why not? Turns out golfing was not for him. And then another time they came along and said, you know what? We learned to do stand-up comedy. We do a course for stand-up comedy. And he thought, yeah, okay. And he went along. Guess what he's doing nowadays? He's a comedian. Okay. So here you go. Show up, expose yourself, go outside of your comfort zone. That is where the magic happens. And you have no fucking clue what is really triggering you, what is in a positive way, what makes you grow. You don't know. So therefore, if you just play it safe and I'm the victim, well, no, take action and check it out, what happens. See,
And that's why you got to study. You got to study and build your own growth plan. I think a lot of people, they're like, they show up to the therapist and they kind of put the responsibility on them when they're only there to kind of help guide you. And unfortunately, the reality of the world is not every therapist is a great therapist. Like every basketball player is not a great basketball player. There's so many therapists in the world now. And then you have, I think, the kind of dark shadow of money over the therapy industry as well. A lot of people get paid from problems, you included, because in the military, when you get out, if you're significantly messed up, you get disability payments. And when you're paid to be disabled, where's your incentive to heal? Where's your incentive to grow?
Ouch.
And then plus, if you lose, if you heal, you fix yourself, you lose those dollars, and nobody wants to lose money.
Ooh, ouch. A rather cynical way of looking at things. But
I absolutely hate the term when veterans call themselves disabled. It doesn't, because I've met people, I have friends with no legs, a friend of mine who's blind, and they don't consider themselves disabled. But you meet these people and they're, permanently disabled. And it's like, you're never really permanently disabled if you believe that you can get better.
And let's be very clear about that. We are not talking negatively about disabled, okay? Please, guys, don't write in, you're dishing the disabled community bullshit. We are saying what we're dishing is the victim mentality.
Right.
And the passive, aggressive, it's all your fault. You make me better. And from now and then, I see that still at work. I mean, luckily nowadays, I'm an anesthetist. I do purely anesthetics. In the past, I was a pain physician. And there were patients who came with all their 20 years of problems. You, doctor, need to fix me. And you just know that you're on a very hard position there, because you need a frontal lobotomy to make this guy do something different, and makes it really, really hard. Now, whilst nowadays when I run my show here, virtually every guest is saying the same thing. They are maybe using different words, they may be using different examples, but it's basically the same thing. You're when you move from victim to survivor, now that's a big breakthrough. But when you then actually take action consistently in one direction, that makes you a thriver. That's where the post-traumatic growth comes in. And we see that with so many women who have been abused and nowadays are much stronger. So you were referring earlier on that everyone has their trauma. 1 in 3 women in the United States and in the world will experience rape or sexual abuse. 1 in 7 men. So here you go. The statistics are there. Everyone will suffer from trauma. Everyone will have times which are bloody, bloody hard. And it's okay to be a victim for a certain time. You need to lick your wounds. No 2 ways around it. I need you to get clarity where you want to be. But don't pitch a tent over there. So don't just, create a living over there, but actually say, okay, fine. Yes, that has all happened to me. And no, I didn't want that, but it has happened. Now what?
Yeah. And living in a world like that, like you mentioned, that 1 in 3 women, I mean, such a horrible statistic. When I hear, I've heard rape somewhat kind of referred in the same category as some war stuff. But there are redeemable things about war. Like you have the bonds with your friends, you have these experiences you went through, but there's nothing redeemable about sexual assault or rape. So coming back from those is, obviously much harder than coming back from a combat experience, where you can look back and you can say, I was proud of what I was doing. I was there with my friends. But things like rape and sexual assault, finding your way back from that is a complicated journey.
Absolutely. The point, though, is many, many women are able to do so. And many women are now going out there and leaving their mark on the world in response to their trauma. They are not passive victims. They have changed and they have transformed. And they're now out there and trying to change the world. And that's beautiful. And that is what I wanted to show as an example, that if such women can go through that transformation, then you have to say, wow, okay. And that was what helped me, I guess, because I was in that pity, self-pity crap position. God, I was wallowing in my self-pity. And ultimately, my mentor gave me a book to read, and I thought I had it hard due to a number of things. And then in this book, this woman was basically awful things happened to her, and that all within the 10, 15 first pages. And I read that, and I thought, and whilst you should never compare traumas, I mean, every trauma is individual, etc. I was still saying, wow, okay, she beat me hands down. But her book was all about transforming and growing after that trauma. And I thought, okay. So that was the first time where I was actually pulled out of that self-pity role. And maybe sometimes you need that. But again, this was a mentor who introduced me to that book, and she used that book as a hook for me to hold on to, or as a life ring for me to grab onto and get out of this dirty place of self-pity. So whatever it takes. But to establish post-traumatic growth, you can't just do it all yourself. You really need to find a community, and with community I mean people who have been in your particular part of hell and who have found a way out, who are a bit further down the line, down the path, shall I say, and who can now show you what to do, which steps to take. And you actually did that with your college, coming full circle now back into your role now, and what you would try to do now. You're trying to help people by giving them maybe some standard operating procedures as far as life in college is concerned. How do you survive college, kind of a thing?
I have a chapter in my book called Build Your Armor, and the entire thing is about your support system, and your community is your armor. Yeah. But you have to put it on and maintain it, and your team is always going to start with you. Yeah. So it starts with you, but you have to build positive relationships with people around you. And that is where a lot of veterans struggle, because you come back and it's hard to relate to people. So my book gives some practical advice on how veterans can relate to their classmates, to professors, to society, and kind of forge new friendships that aren't necessarily dependent on the military.
Brilliant. Absolutely brilliant. And with that, basically starting to create a new life. So basically asking, who do you want to be when you grow up? And it doesn't matter how long you have been in the military or how long you have lived a certain type of life. Let's widen the scope a bit. You have lived that life. That life was the past. Now, the past does not equal the future. So, okay, who do you want to be now? And to a certain degree, yes, you might grieve for the loss of your past. That's okay for a little while. But you also have got a blank slate. You've got an empty canvas on which you can now paint the new you. And that is actually quite a cool position. You've got a freedom to start again. So yes, okay, put a bit of grief into it, because yes, you're saying goodbye to the old guy. But what about the new guy? When do people who go at 18 into their job, when do they get the opportunity, the privilege to stop and think and assess, maybe there's a better way to go? Very few people do that. Those people who do it are like me, who basically crash and burn with burnout or PTSD or depression or whatever it is. And then finally, we actually take some time out. Here you are as a veteran. You have finished your military service, in your case. Now what? Now that is an opportunity. That is a positive thing if you choose to look at it like that.
Yeah, it's so easy to look at our obstacles and our problems as these insurmountable things, when really they're just opportunities for us to better ourselves. And, I think it's just become so easy to keep playing the victim card over and over again, especially for military veterans.
Cool. I think it's you put the onus on the veteran, and I think that is maybe ruffling some feathers. At the same token, though, I know exactly where you're coming from, and it's the same thing with addicts. It's the same thing with people going through mental health struggles. It's the same thing there. You have got choices that you can make every second. And for me as an addict, I can either work on my recovery or I can work on my relapse. It's either or. Every decision brings me either one way or the other way.
Right. Every day you're moving towards your goals or away from them. But I like the recovery and relapse. And there's nothing that just drives me crazier, especially in the veteran community, for people that did these incredible things, serving, accomplished all these things, won these awards, got these medals, and then they're kind of relegated to a life of misery when they get out.
Yeah. No, brilliant. Brilliant. John, I think you've done a fantastic work there by actually putting some very practical suggestions together and some how to do kind of transition from the military for dummies, and I think that's so important, and it's so beautiful. Maybe this might be the start of a movement that you're creating, the snowball system, that sort of turns into an avalanche. Wouldn't that be nice to actually help other people transition, and then in turn take on leadership roles that potentially make this world a better place? Because certainly certain parts of military thinking can be very advantageous. Some parts maybe not so. Okay, fair call. I mean, it is if you are used to ass kicking, maybe in the Western world not so accepted at home.
Right.
Okay, so
things like cursing all the time and stuff like that, it's not always the best in polite society, but there's definitely things you learn as far as, discipline, commitment, teamwork, and things like that. And I think that, one of the good things about the military is you are put in situations of hardship. And that's how you grow, is through hardship. So veterans are fortunate because you get to experience hardship. It's all about how you can grow from that, because like you mentioned, everyone's going to have things that happen to them over the course of their life.
Wow. John, if people really gel with what you have said, where can they find their book? Where can they find you?
So my website is johnhdaviswriter.com. And that's where I have my blog, resources for student and veterans, and my book.
Brilliant. And guys, look down there into the description of the YouTube video and of the podcast. You find it there. And whilst you're down there, press the like and the subscribe button so that you're not missing out any of the other cool interviews I'm doing. Because I've got the privilege to find these people out there, to people like John, who has gone through hell and now has moved to the thriver side and is making this world a better place. And how cool is that for me to talk to him? And I enjoy that. So John, thank you so much for sharing the lessons you've learned the hard way and letting me benefit from them. Because, even listening to you, a few things clicked in my head where I thought, yeah, okay, bit more work to be done there, or a bit more, different way of looking at things. One way or the other, I come out of this interview a different man. And I like that. I like that a lot. So, John, I'm very, very grateful that you came onto my show.
Thanks. And I enjoyed the conversation. And I'm going to take that you're the recovery or relapse every day. You're working on one of the other ones. I'm going to call my grandfather and say that after this.
Cool. And you guys out there, look after yourself and live with passion. Bye.
I never give up. I never give up. I never give up. Turn around.